Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And this is the last EVE Talk before FanFest. I do look forward to FanFest. Unfortunately, because of my work, it's just too busy there. There was no way for me to get the days off needed for me to go to FanFest, which is very unfortunate, but I do look forward to the stream and I will try to catch as much of that as I can after I get back from work, especially, you know, the EVE keynotes. Definitely look forward to that, and to maybe try and partake in the in-game events if there is a smooth way to do that between the FanFest attendees and people flying around in EVE, probably mostly in Solitude. I think that would be very cool. Of course, I'm also hoping for maybe a bombshell, something about Project Nova or something like that. A bit of an update on that game is, of course, something that would make me go a little bit crazy. Still, we are here for the market, and as always, we are going to start with plex. That's going to be at 115. There we go. Let's go to the quick bar. Let's take plex. And we can see that plex are going down a little bit. In fact, in the maybe 5-10 minutes it took me to get ready, another 10-11 plex came in to 1,170,000,000 ISK. So if we go to the price history, we can see that there is definitely a change in the direction, whereas plex were heading straight to and even above 1.2 billion on a couple of days. We are now going down a little bit, and this is because the Fed took action. There is a plex sale going on. That's 15% off. I guess that CCP called the Fed for this episode as a request of one of the viewers, decided to that it was time to maybe stem the bleeding a little bit, because this was becoming pretty expensive. I sold one plex just shy of 1.2 billion. I was just testing the waters to see how quickly it got sold, and so at 1 million less it was picked up in a matter of minutes. The next day I think I sold for 1,120,000,000, and then a final one was also sold at just shy of 1,140,000,000. So I did see 1,240,000,000, excuse me. So I did see the prices go up quite substantially for a few days there, and I took advantage of that with just a couple of plex. I definitely did not go crazy on the selling either, but here now under pressure from a plex sale, and you can see that people are picking them up quite heavily though. Because everything below 1,170,000,000 has already been snatched up in a matter of, well, me talking for less than a minute, which is pretty crazy. So at the moment this market is very, very active. You can also see the increased volumes here that are clearly showing up in the last few days since the sale started, I guess. And a lot of people are taking positions. To me, honestly, buying at this price range is not what I want to do, but it's also like basically a little bit late to sell. I want to sell my plex for more than 1.2 billion, guaranteeing me a decent profit. Below that, I'll just have the patience to wait it out. And if I'm looking for a bottom here myself, I would say if we can hit 900 million, it's a no-brainer, but anything below 1 billion becomes, you know, something to look at if you're looking to invest in plex. That's basically the trade range for this one. But right now, of course, under pressure because of Fed action, the plexes are dropping back a little bit. During FanFest, there are in general a lot more sales going on as well. So I actually think that this may be the turnaround here, and that we may start to go down even through FanFest. The real question is after that, will there be a lot of activity in the game? Will there be renewed interest, a very interesting release coming or not, that might bring people back into the game or convince people to stay more active throughout the summer? That is going to be a big question. My personal experience has always been that the summer slump is a real thing in EVE Online. It's nothing to worry about, but in general activity does decrease significantly, and so I would not be surprised to see plex go down substantially towards a much lower price range through the summer, which is what I'll be looking for to actually make an investment. So I had a small sell opportunity here. I only sold a couple of them, but I'm pretty happy to take the profits that I got for those. Next up, multiple pilot train certificate. Of course, we see the very same thing here. A bit of a drop back. These are currently still selling for 1 billion 209 million, so above 1.2, and the buyers are at 1,075,000,000. I forgot to take a look at the perimeter citadel or the perimeter market for Plexus. Let's do that. Sellers at 1,145,000,000, so you do have like 25 million less that you're paying there, and for the buyers from 1,086,000,000 to up to 1,110,000,000. I think it's a very narrow margin in perimeter, and there's a decent amount of them as well on both the buyers and the sellers. I think it does show that a lot of people are taking positions or actively trading in Plex at the moment, in expectations of course of the changes to Plex themselves, which will then get cut in 500 to become the only currency next to ISK in EVE Online, which is a major change that the Fed is pushing through in New Eden here. Next up, the pallet body resculpt. That is quite unusual, but it's not as dramatic as it seems. The reason of that is of course general volumes. So we see that the body resculpts did shoot up to like 390 million. Then on very high volumes we went back because we had this special Aurum sale for the body resculpt, so we got flooded a little bit, and now we're actually already back towards a median of a little bit less of 300 million. I think sellers are at 274 million, buyers are at 191 million. Why is this not really a missed opportunity or anything like that? Just because of the volumes. Normal volumes on these body resculpts are maybe 4 or 5 a day or something like that. So it's going to be very hard to actually get rid of all these body resculpts at a higher than average price that people purchased during that special Aurum sale. But they tried crushing the price well below average towards 200 million, but we're talking maybe a few dozen body resculpts or something like that. We're not talking hundreds of them normally. What's the volumes here? Let's take a look. Yeah, we're talking 53 and 50 on the trade on the days where these were traded the most. So this is not a place where you're going to make billions of ISK trading this stuff. Next up, skill extractors, as expected of course, very similar chart to Plex as well. A bit of an uptick here in volumes as well. Currently selling for 270.5 million, and the buyers are at 260.6 million. So this will of course very closely mirror the Plex markets. And next up here we've got skill injectors. Now this is a bit more interesting, working towards another 1-year high, where Plex fall back and the skill extractors fall back. Of course, looks like there is still very high demand for skill points, because we are still going back basically from 650 to the 670 on average. And are we selling for 700? Not yet. 685 million for the sellers, 652 million for the buyers of skill injectors. We are up in price in pretty high territory. I think that the farmers of skill points will need Plex to fall back a little bit more in order to really start getting some profits on the skill points that they're farming, but at least it looks set to be possible. If Plex do fall back through even more through FanFest and then remain under pressure on lower activity, will be hard to keep demand up for the actual skill points, but they might just start turning a profit again on the skill injectors, which with Plex prices that high is not always very easy to do. Next up we have the mineral market. That's going to be at 905. There we go. And here I actually think that despite this really drop on today's daily average, I think that we are starting to see the first signs of the new trade ranges. So here for titanium, for instance, I think it's going to be close to 4.5 ISK. Currently selling for 4.53. The buyers are at 424 in my ticker. Let me take a quick look at that. It's not visible right now, but I think that means that in like the last 10-15 minutes we went from 443 up to 453, so a bit of a buyout happening there. And there is a lot of activity here as well. 2 billion on the seller side is going to try to take advantage of the 453 price range, which is actually a little bit above the chart. Yeah, there we go. When I was checking titanium markets, it was still selling for 443, so a decent amount of buying has just happened in the last 15 minutes once again, and then they're bouncing on this bigger order of 2 billion at 453, which is again an indication that we are going to start trading in a new range, so it's no longer testing out yearly lows anymore, going as low as 3 point something. Nope, here 4.5, maybe up to 5, towards 5 ISK is definitely a possibility, but we're looking to trade around this trade range here for now. I would not be surprised that by tomorrow the chart actually picks up a little bit because of the big amount of buying that just happened to push the sellers above 453. Buyers are at 424, so there is some volatility, but look for that trade range, and I think it's going to be a bit too narrow to actually speculate on that a lot. It's up to you to decide whether or not you want to build your stocks or you want to try selling at a good time, like right now. For me personally, titanium is just not on the board for selling, not for buying either. I'm just keeping the minerals as I produce them myself at the moment, waiting for a better sell opportunity, which I do think at some point is going to form. Very similar situation for pyrite here. You can see that the chart is basically flattening out above 5 ISK, below 6 ISK, but at least we're not dumping very low or super low anymore. 5.9 for the sellers, close to 6 ISK, 566 for the buyers as well. Here we can see that above 6 ISK they're coming in with 1.7 billion units as well, which is of course going to keep the price from going above 6.10 or anything like that in the short term, but it looks like there is decent demand as well, and that they're keeping the sell prices close to 6 ISK. So just below that I think is going to become our trade range for pyrite. Next up, Mexalon, the one that I am focusing on and still willing to sell if I'm looking for that liquidity at the moment. So went up pretty high, up to 82 ISK, and is still apparently holding pretty strong, selling at 79 ISK. The buyers are at 74.45. Considering the charts and the very low prices of all other high-SIC minerals, Mexalon is definitely the source to focus on. My guess is that as has often been told in the comments by people, Mexalon is still a very real bottleneck in nosec mining. Even if they clean out entire anomalies, they have plenty of titanium, plenty of pyrite, but Mexalon is the real bottleneck, and so they're basically forced a little bit to import Mexalon from other sources, and the trade hubs of course have volumes readily available. That gives us high-SIC miners a chance to focus on ores that have a lot of Mexalon in it, or as much as possible at least, and if you're not using the rest, try to sell that at least at a profit. And I would say wait for a big war, wait for possibly a CCP intervention. I do think that the other high-SIC minerals could shoot up at some point. It's just going to take quite a bit of patience in order for you to do so. So I would definitely focus on Mexalon mining at the moment. Next up here we've got Isogen, very similar charts to the others of course. We're playing with 1 year lows as low as 42 ISK, then we shoot up a little bit as the Rorqual gets nerfed for a second time, and now it looks like we're set to trade around 50 ISK for Isogen, which historically is extremely cheap as well. 50.33 for the sellers, 49.11 for the buyers, very small margin. What do you notice here then for that small margin? From let's say 53 ISK at 1.2 million, you're going into a lot of competition here all of a sudden. 21 million at 51.10, 27 million at 50.87, another 12 million at 50.83, and here another 33 million at 50.35. So right now there's, in the last 24 hours, a decent amount of dumping has been happening in Isogen. This is going to put a little bit of pressure on the price, but I do think that demand will remain strong enough that will stay just above 50 ISK no matter what. If we dive down that, I think it'll get picked up pretty soon. So at the moment, Isogen selling for 50 ISK. Is that good? Definitely not. Is it better than seeing the chart continuously fall to ever lower price points? Obviously, at least you're making a little bit of ISK of your Isogen, but it's definitely still not great. This is another one that I'd rather If I don't need the fresh ISK, I would rather build up my stocks so that I can sell in the right opportunity. And finally, we've got Noxium. A lot of people, when I was suggesting that maybe moon mining could be mineral specific in HiSec and in wormhole space, just to bring the feature there, a lot of people said, hey, don't forget, Noxium is also a HiSec mineral. So I wanted to maybe make that one like the new bottleneck, which could be interesting for Noxium prices that have already dropped to very low price ranges. And give that one only to wormhole space. That way you would have 4 in each. Three, yeah, except for Morphite, which is Tech 2 related. So you would keep the Tech 2 market contained to nullsec, but you would give the ability to produce extra Noxium, Megasite, Zydrine, yeah, maybe Morphite then. Did I count wrong? Yeah, it's actually 8, damn. And maybe Morphite as well, only to wormhole space. And then of course to nullsec as well, on the moons there that don't produce anything. I think it could be a very interesting solution to bring moon mining to the entire market. It could definitely change the dynamics of the minerals as well, where Mexilon being the very clear winner is something that may not be as easily predictable, because people in HiSec might decide to moon mine for a lot of Mexilon, try and take advantage of these higher prices, crashing this down, but that means a lower activity on the other minerals normally, pushing those back up a little bit. Do you start a war over some of that? And it could be interesting, I think, but of course it's all up to CCP to decide. So Noxium itself definitely pushed back from its 1-year low as well, when as low as 290 ISK. Shot back up to 373, had to give a little bit of ground, but is still holding strong, apparently around 350. Yeah, 350 for the sellers, 337 for the buyers. This was maybe a slight buy that you could do when Noxium dipped below 300, but I also think that those got picked up pretty damn quickly by the market at that point. But this, of course, this increase in price here is the Rorcal nerf showing up in the mineral market. It was basically a little bit overpowered. Next up for nullsec, we have a Zydrine that is also deciding to trade around 1000 ISK at the moment, historically speaking, and from my perspective, decently cheap Zydrine. 996 ISK for the sellers, 970 for the buyers. Pretty small margin, I would say, especially if you're looking to do some manufacturing, if you're looking to use Zydrine yourself, then building stocks at this price point is definitely not a bad idea. What is happening exactly in nullsec? It's probably a pretty quiet period. There are not really massive wars on the front page of Reddit every day or anything like that are happening. So I think that despite the Rorcal nerf, basically miners are still out in force trying to get as much ISK out of it as possible, and of course the nullsec minerals are probably being overmined a little bit compared to what was happening before, where there was probably a bit more of indiscriminate mining happening in nullsec. Megasite also, as you can see, slowly coming under pressure, slowly dipping well below 1400. 1319 for the sellers, 1220 for the buyers, losing a couple percentage every week here in the last 2 months. I think basically, especially since the Rorcal nerf, there is a bit more of a refocus in nullsec on getting these nullsec minerals going. The one that's not doing that is Morphite though, still staying under pressure, dipping back below 10,000 by quite a bit, 9,200 for the sellers, 9,060 for the buyers. Morphite at 9,000, historically speaking, is once again very cheap, but of course we are in a meta with very abundant mineral supplies. It's all up to you to try to decide whether or not you think that this could make a comeback at some point. Maybe one small note on that that I've not really seen mentioned anywhere, but just off the top of my head, I'm actually thinking about supply demand here at the moment. It could be important to note that the new refineries will probably give better yields of refining than the current citadels. So if you expect, or if you calculate that a decent amount of ore is still being refined at suboptimal levels, whether it's in high sec or in other spaces, so not always in the very best places in nullsec, which is what's going on at the moment. You can expect an even bigger increase of mineral supply because of the potential refining boost when the new refineries actually come out. It's again something to keep in mind. This could actually make for very cheap minerals at some point, or as I would personally expect on a summer slump, we tend to stay pretty low for minerals once again. If the new refineries stay come out after the summer, I think it's just going to keep that pressure. So I would say for minerals at the moment, you will need a very long horizon unless something very drastic happens in the game, like a completely crazy war that shoots up here out of nowhere, or a CCP intervention. If that doesn't happen, I think we're set for very low prices through the summer after the launch of the refineries, and then maybe the winter time with a possible expansion with maybe new stuff to produce or something like that could become the next opportunity, the next horizon to look to actually unload some of your stuff. So it's a very long horizon. Keep that in mind. I do not expect anything drastic just from the market at the moment in minerals. Next up, after minerals, we've got some PI that's at 2120. Okay. And this was doing really well, especially considering the PI materials that are related to fuels. Here we can see construction blocks, again, staying pretty high at around 14,000 on average. Yep, 13,940 for the sellers, 13,216 for the buyers. Well above average considering the entire chart. We are a little bit below the very high peaks, but still doing very well. Construction blocks, you can definitely sell those for a really good price, historically speaking. Consumer electronics finally peaking a little bit after working its way for almost an entire month towards a 1-year high. This is definitely quite an increase in price over the course of 1 month, from 11.5k to 16.5 thousand ISK. At the moment, 14,000 for the buyers. You can see that spread has definitely increased quite a little bit. So I do think that a decent amount has actually come to the market. And we are pushing back a little bit after reaching 17,500 ISK on a 1-day medium price here, which is pretty damn crazy, but still well above average, of course, if you have the patience to sell. One thing to note though, if you're looking to sell, it's more than a full front page, almost 2 pages in the last 24 hours. You will need to do as this player here is doing, selling for 16,500, is undercutting the other point winners by quite a margin, so that you have a better chance of your seller actually getting filled. On the way down, it's always tricky. You always need to give those bigger discounts, and so don't try to sell for 16,800 anymore. It's probably not gonna get picked up. You're just gonna get point one from that price point on. You'll need to give a little bit more of a discount, but you're still selling well above average for sure. Coolants next, slowly falling back as fuels are also falling back a little bit at this point. So I think that that's good news for structure owners, because we're finally seeing a little bit of light at the tunnel when it comes to fuel blocks that were becoming very expensive, but at this point they're falling back. Part of that is of course that coolants, for instance, are also falling back a little bit. Still selling for almost 14,000 ISK. The buyers are at, well, let's say 12,800. This one buyer is bound to be filled pretty quickly. That is still well above average though, to keep in mind. Enriched uranium next, working on a 1-year high and staying pretty strong. One thing to note here is that the 5-day moving average and the median daily prices are crossing the 20-day moving average, so we are probably set to go down a little bit from this point on. Supply still not that super strong. I mean, 3 days ago, just one sell order, 17,700. It basically takes a little bit more time for the PI market to react. So 17,250 for enriched uranium. Pretty much 1-year high prices, and you are selling well above average once again. Mechanical parts next, very similar story. This one is actually really crazy in my book from December on. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 months of straight up increasing in price to 1-year highs to almost 16,000 ISK for mechanical parts. Finally, the turnaround has happened here. 5-day moving average and median daily prices well below the 20-day moving average. Let's take a quick look here again. We were talking more than 15,000. Currently selling for just below 15,000 ISK. Buyers 14,000, 13,900. That is definitely starting to increase in spread as well. So the turnaround is here. The peak has happened in mechanical parts. But of course, this is still a very good time to sell your mechanical parts. Again, one thing to note here is that we will start to be competing with each other more and more. 15,200, 15,000, then just below that, but 996, 990, 988. This is where the competition is happening, and I think more and more, as you can see also almost a full front page being formed in the last 24 hours, will start to go down here more and more quickly. On this increase in price at the tail end here, you are probably selling your mechanical parts like crazy for more than 15,000 ISK. Now to get rid of them very quickly, I do think you'll have to start going 14,800. That will be picked up pretty quickly, but it's going to keep rolling back more and more quickly. You'll have to give bigger and bigger discounts as this downwards pressure here becomes is pretty sharp basically. So there is reason to expect that if you're still trying to sell your mechanical parts at this point. Oxygen next, that is actually quite a sharp movement that we saw last week, indeed, falling back to 410 ISK. So we're going back towards average here. I think basically investors are willing to buy oxygen close to 400 ISK. We're back up to 464 for the sellers, 430 for the buyers. So we definitely recovered a little bit from that sudden crash in price, and some people probably bought some oxygen at a really good price to try and sell if we ever go back above 500. Robotics next, again very similar charts to a lot of the other fuel related PI materials, slowly going down. This one though, for an entire month in a sort of a jaggedy movement, it is going down well below 120,000 now. 118,500 is for the sellers, 115,000 for the buyers. This is well above average, definitely a good price point. The question is, supply starting to pick up? Yeah, almost a full front page of fresh sell orders. If this keeps up, of course, we can also see that we're competing now from 124,000 ISK to 118.5 over the course of a single front page. So you can see that the movement is probably set to accelerate a little bit, as all the other fuel related parts are also under pressure here. Rocket fuel next, trying to stay strong but not really succeeding in the last week or maybe even 10 days. We can clearly see that the median daily price have been well below the chart, and so currently selling for 14,400. Buyers are at 13,000 ISK for rocket fuel. You're still above average on the entire chart, so it's still definitely okay to sell, I think, at this price point, but we're obviously going to start to fall back into this band that is just above the averages. Once we reach these, I think that we'll basically have a very nice few months here for rocket fuel, but I think it's almost inevitable that we'll get back to trading at the 12.5k range. Self-harmonizing power cores here, that had to happen, of course, on the announcement of the refineries. I think the biggest role, the most important information, is that CCP Falsia said that they're planning to price the refineries between the engineering complexes and the Citadel. That makes for a decent amount of PI materials needed for these, and as a result, some people definitely did make a move on that. Whether it's speculation or preparation for production, we have a jump up in self-harmonizing power cores. So it turns out that last week or 2 weeks ago was probably a decent time to already purchase a couple very close to 2 million, selling for 2.4 million now. Buyers are still at 2 million though. So we may yet have time to digest all of this, and a new buy opportunity may actually show up. But this is, of course, the refinery announcement showing up on the chart here. Superconductors next, falling back quite a little bit here. I would say 12,000 a little bit below average, and we are just now reaching the average again, I would say. Actually, 13,600 for the sellers and 12,700 for the buyers probably puts the superconductors on the seller side of things a little bit above average, on the buyer side of things right around average is what I would call it. So still managing to come back a little bit after a pretty sharp decline a couple of weeks ago. Test cultures next, still going pretty low here at the moment, 8,600 on average. 8,700 for the sellers, 8,000 for the buyers. I think I bought some test cultures very close to or just below 8,000 ISK. I think that's a decent investment to make here. It's one of the only PI materials that is actually at a pretty low point and below average on the chart. So if you're looking for a bit of an investment, it's only a couple 100 million that I put in there, so definitely nothing too major that I'm willing to risk here. But if we would dip back towards this price range here, below 7,000 ISK, I do think I'll pump some more ISK into test cultures. It's probably the only PI material here that you could have a bit of an eye on for buy opportunities. And finally, wetware mainframes, also a little bit of a jump, quite a bit more subdued on the chart than the self-harmonizing power cores. But if you look at the bottom here, 2.3 million, selling for 2.6 million. It's yeah, a bit maybe 300,000 jump here and 500,000 for the power cores. So it's a bit of a difference, but 2.6 million for the sellers, 2.4 million for the buyers. This is once again the refinery announcement dev blog hitting the markets right here. Quite interesting, but I do still feel like we'll have time to digest all of that, and that will be back under pressure in a couple of weeks here for these structure related PI materials. Next up, Tech One chips, 3130. So minerals were stabilizing. Unfortunately for the Tech One chips, it looks like demand just isn't there yet. And as a result, the apocalypse here is still playing with 1 year lows, selling for 151 million, 152 maybe for a couple more orders. Buyers are at 140 million. These are extremely cheap apocalypse battleships, and the real unfortunate thing is that the volumes just aren't there either. It's not like there are like 100 apocalypses that are for sale below 155 million. An alliance might pick that up, but that's just not happening at the moment. Then we would see some volatility. Demand just is too low to see any sort of volatility. We have this short, long drawn out subjugation of this price, which is basically you could see this almost as a bit of an aggregate of what happened to minerals here, especially in the bigger battleships. The arbitrator next tried to jump up just a little bit, but you can see that we're once again going back down, and basically we're trading at this just above 8 million trade range, where we used to be around 9 million if we were lucky. 8.2 million for the sellers, 7.3 for the buyers. Again here on the demand side of things, pretty low. Sellers, there's a bit more, but it's also of course only a cruiser, so it's normal that there's a bit more for sale. It's easier to produce. Bellicose next. I'm gonna try to remember to switch out to different ships next week, because we've seen these a couple of weeks in a row now. So the Bellicose here probably going to be under pressure here. 875 at the high trade range, currently selling for less than 8 million. Yeah, this is definitely quite a bit coming in the last week or so. Buyers are at 6.7 million, obviously under pressure as well. Demand side here, again, this is definitely all there is. And on the sellers there's a bit more. When some dumping happens in a couple of weeks competing with each other, we can go for less than 8 million on a cruiser, which is very cheap. The Breacher, again here you can see the trade range before the Ascension expansion, between 500,000 and 600,000. Now here we're definitely below that, selling for 423, and the lack of demand is exemplified in the buy orders right here. So this is the mineral changes impact. Higher trade range, lower trade range. It made, of course, Tech One ships very accessible for alpha clones. That is something to keep in mind. Was that a strategy? Possibly, but it also does mean that manufacturers of these ships are stuck with very thin margins and not a lot to do. Next up here we've got the Brutix. Again, it's really starting to be very visible now. Ascension expansion, raw call increase, mineral dumping happening right here, and trading from 55 million to less than 50 million. 48.6 for the sellers, 45 for the buyers. So this here is the Ascension expansion. We thought, at least I thought, maybe for the alpha clones, and that some of the very popular ships would trade up a little bit, but nope, the mineral market has basically gutted any chance for basically alpha clone central production that would yield a slightly better margin than maybe some of the other ships. It just never materialized. Here is the catalyst actually shooting up a little bit, probably on the volume spike right here on some buying. So here 1.2 million. Are we under pressure? Well, it's actually quite subdued, but we're starting to sell, including 890 for less than 1.2 million. So a bit of a buying spree happening here in the catalyst. There is at least some volatility to show, which is quite nice. It is of course a very popular one for some suicide ganking. This could be some preparation for FanFest, because if you want to disrupt the storyline there, you might want to use some catalysts around the Excel Citadel that has been put down in Postuvin, which represents Harpa. So we'll see if that one actually explodes. That could be cool. Next up here we've got the Cormorant, the only one that is actually, I should say, trading a little bit above its normal trade range. This was of course due to the rebalance. A lot of people wanting to fly some Cormorants out there to look at that sleek design, but we can also see that at 125 we're already well below that. Those times are over, the good margins for the Cormorants are over, and people took advantage of that. 102, 190, 160, coming in here from 138 very quickly to 126, 128, and etc. It just keeps going down pretty quickly on pretty big volumes. So the Cormorant knew a bit of a resurgence, being an anomaly here because of the rebalance. Crucifier next, again before Ascension, trade range maybe 380,000 was possible at a higher range, but now we're trading so much below that, it's almost ridiculous. 360,000 for the sellers, 184,000 for the buyers. Bit of a jump up on some volumes, so there was a bit of Crucifier buying, but it's going to get squashed pretty quickly. Next up here, the Drake. Unfortunately, the Drake, it's not even an Ascension knack, although it's clearly visible here as well. But it's just basically that the poor Drake has not been in the meta for so long that for an entire year, basically going down from 60 million to 45 million in one straight downward line. 46 million for the sellers, 41.6 for the buyers. This is yeah, quite sad to see almost for a very iconic ship that back in the day used to be so dominating in Nosec space here. Maybe CCP should look at that, but of course it's all about CCP themselves deciding when it's time to shake up the meta. Next up here we've got the Retriever, very unfortunate story as well, of course, with the change to the Rorqual and the changes to the Orca. I think a lot of these mining barges did become a lot less popular, maybe at some point. In fact, I'm gonna write that down for next week. We're gonna check on all of the mining barges. Because I am curious to see what stuff like the Hulk, the Mackinac have been doing as well. So that's coming next week. This week it's actually going to be the faction battleships that I'll take a look at. But yeah, the Retriever, this is a bit of a double whammy. Used to trade around 28, 29 million, was definitely possible. Then the Ascension expansion hits, of course. We have the cheaper minerals, but we also have the Rorqual and the Orca becoming very competitive, I would personally say. Definitely the Rorqual, of course, he becomes king, but the Orca becomes a competitive high-sec miner as well, and as a result we get hit so hard that we're actually trading around 20 million now. Probably lost almost 50% of its trade range right here on the Retriever. Demand is also almost non-existent. And finally the Tempest, another battleship that clearly showcases that at the Ascension expansion we stopped trading at around 180 million and started trading around 150. Currently selling for 137 million. Decent volumes as well. I would not be well, actually no. It's going a bit too fast here. 159, 150, 142, 138. So, and there's also not enough for an alliance to start pick this up. So it's quite unfortunate, of course, for the Tech 1 market, but it's not in the best place if you're looking to be a manufacturer in this. Next up, the Tech 2 market at 40 minutes. Okay, let's take a look at some trade opportunities. Here is the Aries going back down towards the last trigger, 21.8 on average, buying at 20.2, very high supply right here. I think if you're looking to buy a couple of interceptors to use, or possibly to try and make a trade on, then here the Aries is in a decent spot to buy a couple. Here is the Claw. I actually sold on that trade a little bit, so I bought these for like close to 19 million, which you can once again do. Again, notice the very strong supply, but on this jump here in price, I think I sold them for 23 million or something like that, making not a lot of profit, but a little bit of profit. So it's good to see that this is possible. Unfortunately, of course, the Claw is back under pressure quite substantially. You could almost say that there is a buy opportunity in that one as well. Next up here, we've got the Crow. All right, we're actually starting to see a uniform picture here. Once again, going to a pretty low point, lack of demand, quite a decent amount of supply. Just one buy order here that needs to be filled, and you're buying them for 18 million. This is definitely one to look at if you're looking to invest in some Tech 2 ships, but the general vibe here does seem to be moon mining might actually go up in potential, and we might actually see lower prices. So this is part of the gamble, I think. Here is the Aries finally coming back a little bit after trading at a very low range for a couple of months here, coming back to the normal 45 million. So on lack of supply, 45.5 million for the sellers. If you bought during this time for less than 40 million, you can definitely try to make a bit of profit here. But this is just a normalization of the Aries market. Flycatcher next, also up in price a little bit, all right, and slowly going down. So you had a buy opportunity 53 million, sell opportunity 77 million, and now we're in between those two. Where are the buyers at 57? So it's too late to sell, it's too early to buy in the Flycatcher, but on higher volumes, showing that the Tech 2 market is alive a little bit. Yeah, those interceptors in power territory could be interesting. Seeing what the interdictors are doing here, jumping up quite nicely. Sell opportunity in the Heretic. You could have bought these for 45. You're currently selling them for 59 million. Not bad. In fact, looking at this Flycatcher here, if we get rid of the anomalous data point, not bad, not bad. Heretic as well, not bad. A couple of interdictors could actually be quite interesting, and you still have volumes of the 20s on average, so you might be able to trade in that with a couple of ships. The Hound next, stealth bombers. Let's see how those are doing. Oh, actually jumped up. Very nice. I like this. 20 million. You could have probably bought them for 19 million last week. Currently selling for 22.6 million. Unfortunately, we're a little bit late this week, but a couple of weeks ago, here we go, 23 million was possible. So again, a little bit of volatility, which is good for us traders. The Malediction next, which is another interceptor, a little bit too flat. I would like to see it closer to 20 million. Where are the buyers at? 21 million. So nope, I definitely prefer something like the Crow or the Aries and the Claw, but really the Crow if you're looking to pick up a couple of really cheap interceptors rather than the Malediction. And then here we've got the Manticore Stealth Bomber, also a little bit of a jump after 23 million on the buyer side of things. We jumped up to 25. That's unfortunately too subdued to make some money. So are we buying for less than 23 million? Yeah, you might be able to pick up some cheap Manticores at this point as well. Nemesis next, going down substantially. It's actually really important that we're going down below this line. 21.3 million. We're looking for buys at less than 20 million. Not just yet, but considering the huge supply, it could at some point happen. And then here we've got the Purifier. That one unfortunately is staying in this trade range of 21 to 22 million. 22 for the sellers, 19.6 for the buyers. Yeah, lack of demand here. You could buy purifiers for less than 20 million on the entire chart. That's right here. So that is not that bad. Actually pretty widespread here because of the lack of demand in purifiers. You could try to make a move on that, I think. And then finally we've got the Saber showing some nice volatility as well, but unfortunately is not exactly in the spot you want to be for either selling or buying. So I'm seeing some buy opportunities. I definitely like the lack of demand in the Crow, like the lack of demand in the Purifier, and maybe the Ares and the Claw could be interesting as well. Ares, Claw for 19 million is not that bad. Ares 20.2, it's slightly too high. I would prefer to be competing with these, so maybe we need a little bit of patience on that. And then when it looks to those outliers that we might need to take a closer look at, here is the Heretic sell opportunity in full swing. This is your time to sell those if you made the gamble. These are quite interesting to see the Flycatcher and the Heretic and the Saber show this nice volatility. It shows that there is maybe something to be done with the interdictor market as well. So take two, it's alive, but what will the impact of the refineries and the changes to moon mining be? Hopefully, I'm personally hoping for even more volatility so that we can look for those trades in the Tech 2 market. Maybe have some sort of targeted attacks on in NASDAQ happen as well, disruptions that could really turn this around. This could help the Tech 2 market find even more volatility, but not so bad. I'm actually really happy with the interceptors, the stealth bombers, and now the interdictors showing some decent opportunities. Next up, the Tech 3 market. Oh boy, 4630. So we know that we were in very oversupplied territory, but a couple of them were making a little bit of a comeback. Unfortunately, it's not the Confessor that's going to do that, currently selling for 30 million right here, oversupplied like crazy. I would still say try and put up a buy order at 28 million. You're probably not doing a bad deal. The reason I was saying that is because it happened here in the Hecate, big volume spike coming in, but we did jump up towards 45 million and I sold my Hecates on that opportunity, and we're still holding 41 million for the sellers, 32 million for the buyers. So the oversupply situation, yes, it's obviously there, it's still happening, but the Hecate is showing that these bottoms at 30 million are actually decent buy opportunities if you have the patience for that. I made a bit of money on my Hecate trade. The Jackdaw next, this one is actually the one that apparently jumped up a couple of days ago, up to 41 million. Already subdued back down to 33 million, but again, if you have had a lot of Jackdaws, which I think you could have bought for 28 million or even less than that, yeah, 27 million and 28 million were definitely possibilities. And just a couple of days ago, you could have tried to sell those for 40 million. Now, you may not have gotten rid of hundreds of them, but as I've said, if you'd done those investments in small increments, then you might actually have made some money on that. I was a little bit late, so I'll need to be patient for the Jackdaw, but it shows that it's possible in these Tech 3 markets. And then finally here we've got this Vapel that unfortunately, like the Confessor, is still trading at 30 million, pretty flat in a well oversupplied market right here, 180, 200. It's gonna take some time to digest for all of that, for the market to digest it. But yeah, on the Hecate, I made some money on that by buying at these low trade ranges. It is still possible. I do have to admit one thing, when it comes to the cruisers, that rebalance may be a nerf, so that's a gamble I would not take right now. I'm actually looking to sell at the very first opportunity, but it is still possible. I've been known to be wrong on a lot of things, but that is one thing that I wanna mention here to you guys. Do with it what you want. This is just a personal opinion, but from the talk that I saw on an Imperium stream from CCP Fuzzy, I did get a feeling that they wanted to stop these Tech 3 cruisers from being the best in categories. I would not be surprised that we actually get some serious nerfs in the strategic cruiser market, unfortunately. Because, well, Legions being bought for 120 million is definitely not bad. Historically speaking, pretty low point, as you can see. Here is the Loki as well. Now talk about being at a 1-year low, currently selling for 115 million. Buyers are at 107. You can pick up Lokis for 110 million. But again, be careful of that rebalance. Proteus here managed to claw its way back up a little bit from 120 to 140 million, currently selling for 132. Buyers are at 121. A little bit better than the others, but really not by that much. And finally here we've got the Tengu that, after trying to go up to 140, has now been squashed by more supply and the lack of demand. Look at that. Full front page, 25, 15, 17, 50, 27, 17. Final one, 17 more Tengus coming to the market at 126 million. Buyers are at 117. It's just oversupplied like crazy, and unfortunately I'm not expecting the rebalance to change that. So yeah, Tech 3 market, ouch, also pretty hard to make money in the production of these right here. And then finally, for the extra product, we're going to check on the faction battleships, is what I said. So let's go take a look, and let's write down 50-50. There we go. And let's see if there's anything interesting here. These, of course, faction battleships have been in the meta, I think especially the pirate faction battleship. So let's take a look at some of these charts. Here is the Apocalypse Navy issue. I'm basically seeing a battleship produced with minerals. You do need to do to have a bit more work, maybe some need to sit right here, maybe a little bit of faction warfare influence as well, but the Apocalypse is clearly trading well below its current Apocalypse Navy issue is clearly trading well below its current average. 308 million for the sellers, 291 for the buyers. Armageddon Navy issue trading at a 1-year low price point again as well. That is quite low, 332 million for the sellers, 303 for the buyers. So Amar Navy battleships very low at the moment. Dominic's Navy issue, actually a little bit above average. That's quite interesting, selling for 718 million. Lack of supply, 560 for the buyers. This is where you could actually make some money on the Dominic's Navy issue. Very interesting to see that. Is the Megatron high as well? It's maybe a little bit above average, not by that much. Currently selling for 444 million. You can clearly see the lack of supply in these. Very interesting to see this happening. For people with bigger wallets, you are of course trading in the hundreds of millions on a single ship, but this is quite interesting. Raven Navy issue next. Here, this could be quite influenced quite a lot by the faction warfare stuff. We know that Kaldari were winning quite a lot, which might mean very cheap stuff here. And here is the push-up. Quite interesting. So you could have bought these for 370 and you're currently selling them for 468. There was something to be done in a Raven Navy issue trade, and what I noticed is at Reddit we have seen several threads where basically Galente Militia made a bit of a comeback against, or at least had some sort of victories by taking out citadels or by asking other parties to take out citadels, but that there may be a little bit of a comeback when it comes to the Galente versus the Kaldari, and that this may be an impact of that, which I find quite interesting. Scorpion Navy issue, very similar, as you can see, for a couple of months, trading well below average at around 350 million, now selling for 436, and a little bit of a jump up here in the last 10 days or so. For the Minmatar, unfortunately, both the Minmatar and the Apocalypse Navy issue trading well below their average. Currently 246 for the sellers, that's pretty cheap for a faction battleship. And then the Typhoon Fleet issue actually trading a little bit above average here. 407 million for the sellers for the Typhoon Navy issues. 240 for 245 for one Minmatar battleship, 407 for the other one. quite a wide spread, quite unusual. It's probably also, of course, the smallest market, considering that Minmatar tends to be the least popular race in EVE Online. So that's it for the Navy faction battleships. I think if we want to make some money on that, we do need a pretty long horizon. You can see that we're talking trends that last several months, but we might also need to keep a closer eye on faction warfare. Here are the Galente losing side, I think, at the moment, very high prices. Here are the Caldari winning side, lower prices, but here maybe the turnaround is coming, and here is the jump up in price. Quite interesting to see this. Other faction battleships, of course, the pirate battleships. Let's take a look at what's happening here. The Barghest trading for less than 650, selling 654, buyers are at 591. Quite a sharp drop in price here all of a sudden. So interesting, the trade range seems to be a little bit below 700 million here on average, and at the moment trading a little bit below that. Decently volatile, this one. If you're looking to do some active trading, you know, here buying for 630, selling for 670 in a matter of maybe 2 weeks is definitely not bad. So I would say that this is quite a bit more risky, but this chart for the Barghest does show some potential at the moment. For instance, try and pick a couple up for less than 600 million, which should be possible. And yeah, you have quite a nice purchase on the Barghest. Next up here, the Macarial, very, very popular doctrine battleship at the moment. Start the year at 450, ends the year at 300 million, oversupplied like crazy. Very cheap Macarials on the market at the moment. The Nestor next, very similar situation, starts the year at 700 million, ends the year at 400 million, 384 million for a Nestor. I don't have one. I think I'm gonna buy one. These guys have been decently new to the game. These are, of course, Sisters of Eve faction battleships, and they used to cost like $1 billion on launch, and they actually stayed there for quite a while because it was decently difficult to get the blueprint copies. But I think with the new ways that CCP allowed for us to grab these, and with Project Discovery, we're now seeing decently affordable Nestors. I might just pick one up because I do like the design of the battleship, and it's another drone ship as well, of course. It's quite unique in EVE Online. Next up here, we've got a Nightmare trading for 330 million, 360 for the sellers. Again, probably a little bit above average considering the entire year here, but not out of line or anything like that either. Rattlesnake Victory Edition going for 4 billion, so that one is obviously a little bit of a unique battleship. 3.8 billion for the sellers, 2.6 for the buyers. Let's say that this is an outlier. The volumes obviously means that this is not actively traded like the other ones. Balgorn at a pretty low price point. Wow, 250 million for a Balgorn. It's considered a very, very powerful faction battleship here as well, especially in wormhole space. It's often used to turn the tide of battles with its neuting power, I think, if that still is the case, or has maybe a redesign done something about that. A contract has been assigned to you. Thank you very much. Let's see, web energy, yep, neutralizers and Nosferatus. So very cheap Balgorns at the moment. That's definitely the name of the game. Rattlesnakes next, also pretty cheap, I would say. Yeah, definitely below its average. Currently for 361 million. I have bought my Rattlesnake that I still have in Iona for 440 or something like that. And finally we've got the Vindicator, pretty cheap as well, which is an indication that again we have probably a pretty calm nullsec situation where a lot of these blueprints for these guys can be grabbed. So faction battleships, Nightmare is still trading on average, but a lot of these are basically very affordable at the moment. And if you're looking to place a gamble, I would place it in the Barghest if I look at this entire chart. And there you go, guys. That's going to be it for this EVE talk. Kept it just under an hour. Awesome. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all next time.